My Kind of Medicine. Today, I am speaking with Bob Peck, a festival award winning filmmaker, author, meditator, and spiritual seeker. Bob holds a bachelor's degree in religious studies and radio, TV, film from the University of Texas. He has created several conscious films focusing on spiritual and advocacy documentaries. Bob is also a Kriya Yoga practitioner and a certified mindfulness and meditation teacher. In his day job, he works at the intersection of advertising and mindfulness in big tech. Today, Bob is here to share insights from his first book, Original Sin is a Lie. In this book, Bob guides us through his journey along the spiritual buffet line, exploring wisdom from Zen Buddhists, indigenous shamans, and karma yogis. He delves into the avatar doctrine of the Bhagavad Gita, the teachings of Byron Katie, new scientific perspectives on spirituality, and the true, loving message of Jesus. Bob argues that while the Bible is not infallible, it does point to the reality of who we are, much like the teachings of Sri Ramana Maharshi, Carl Jung, Anandamayi Ma, the Gospel of Thomas, and A Course in Miracles. From the transformative power of psychedelics to the understanding of the illusion, Bob's book invites us to discover our true nature through a rich spectrum of mystic wisdom across many different spiritual traditions. So please relax, tune in, and enjoy this talk with the very kind and insightful Bob Peck. Thank you for being here. So, I loved your book. I think
Thank you.
it's really interesting. It resonated deeply with me. I
Thanks so
love
much.
the bridging of all the different teachings. And one of my first questions for you is, did you have a mystical insight that sparked you onto this journey, like a specific moment?
I think that the most significant kind of synchronicity, mystical experience that I've ever had, I write about in the book, which is when it's called Cosmic Connections, I think is the chapter where um, I was basically fortunate enough to meet an Apache medicine man. As some people I think didn't believe me for years until I finally shared some pictures of him. But um, he was a friend of my dad's, and he was very wise, literally energy healer. He had a day job. He was a probation officer, and he kind of like Stephen Mitchell talks about his Zen master like fixed laundry machine, like washing machines. It's like there's I like the image of these like hidden holy men and women just that don't have a website. Um, and anyway, this was one of those guys, and he kind of told me books to read, and he did healing ceremonies on members of my family, and he was just a really impressive guy. He passed away last year, um, and so rest in power to Richard. But he was a probation officer for a couple decades, and when I was filming my kind of feature documentary, it's like my thesis, I guess you could say, in documentary school at UT of Austin, Hookham, called The Kingdom Within, which is, as you know, you read my book of yoga and Christianity, and very kind of happenstance meeting of this interview subject, Richie Flores, who's a really great guy who learned yoga in prison. And I didn't expect to interview him. I was going to interview his yoga teacher, and then she had to leave, and she was like, "Oh, you should interview this guy." And I ended up just being hypnotized by this person. And at the end of the interview, kind of afterward, he was like, it was so good. And he was just like, "How did you get into this? What do you know about spirituality? Like, what a cool topic for a film and all this stuff." And I was like, "Oh, thanks. I'm comparative religion background, and I've always kind of read the mystics." And he says, "What do you know about spiritual energy?" And I said, "I don't know much, but I know a guy who knows." And I think I said he's Apache. And Richie said, "Is his name Richard?" And I that was like the computer restarted. It was like calculations just were just kind of wild. And I said, "How do you know Richard?" He said, "He was my PO." And so that was like probably, I mean, that's up there on the list of like top three, top five, like moments of like just all you do is laugh. Like this is so clearly a dream. When you have moments like that, I think beyond that one that kind of involves other people in like a Shakespearean way. Um, I've had deep meditations. I've had um, really, Aaron, probably the most significant like spiritual feeling is just love, like just having a level of compassion, and like empathy, and like just kind of all those words into one feeling where you just feel like solidarity with every being, um, for a period. It doesn't last. It's not permanent for me. It seems like some of the gurus it is,
Mhm.
um, but there's kind of no coming back from that stuff. Even if you lose it for a little bit, um, you can reset with meditation or a psychedelic, or a variety of tools to get back there. So those are my humble highlights.
Beautiful. Yeah, I found that at the at the level of profound truth, there's really like deep belly laughter or weeping.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One or the other or both.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. At the same time, sometimes that like profound sense of like I know, and it's not at all the intellect. It's like the whole connection, and it's like deeply felt. I also
Absolutely.
I also like that idea of the kind of anonymous person who's on a certain level. There's the podcast Buddha at the gas station, a gas pump, which
Yeah,
the title of that is made just to throw that like you don't know who you're talking to, and
absolutely. Love Rick Archer. Yeah, yeah.
the
Big
yeah,
fan.
yeah. So
Yeah,
we're
the
all
Buddha
on
at the
that
gas pump.
gas pump. Yeah, it's very
The
cool.
Divine Mother on the Zoom call. The beloved in Gmail. Can you
Yeah,
find
right.
them?
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that that idea of serendipity or coincidence, just we're all the map of overlay is we look at those things as coincidence or whatever, just I think because we have these little itty bitty brains in this infinitely complex world, and the levels of what's really happening are just beyond our ability to learn in this school of life.
Absolutely. Well put. Yeah, I like that phrase glitch in the matrix. It's kind of become cliche. In fact, James McRae, Words and Vibrations, who's gratefully become a pal here in Austin. He one of his best memes to me is be the glitch that you want to see in the matrix. Be the change you want to see in the world, Gandhi. And it's like those are such special things. And like to the listener, like don't dismiss them. If you have one or two or three, like there's probably some message coming through. Hopefully it's positive. I've heard that sometimes actually it's negative, in terms of like giving you some kind of, not warning, maybe that's too strong a word, but it basically just says like pay attention. Pay attention to this. Don't get too caught off guard by the dream of Maya, man. It is fucking alluring. It's hypnotic sometimes,
Mm.
most of the
Yeah,
time.
it's pretty convincing, isn't it?
It's a worthy adversary.
I think that there's uh, most of my mystical insights and like those deep revelations come from psychedelics. I've
Yeah,
done a tremendous amount of psychedelics in my life, and
yeah,
they've changed my life in really profound ways of just seeing through the ego and seeing and knowing non-duality in moments.
Absolutely. It's a very powerful tool, and I'm thrilled that the taboo is going away. It's like 10 years ago, this stuff was, I mean, it was anarchy to the mainstream culture. It's still not totally mainstream, but it's close, you know?
It's definitely getting there.
It's
I'm going to be
definitely getting
working.
there.
I'm going to be working pretty soon at a sleep study center to test the effectiveness of treating insomnia with psilocybin in a clinical setting
But wow, amazing. Yeah, it's
with big money back there and stuff. So
the next 5 years, like it's really cool to see kind of what's going to happen and how this is going to change. And I think I what I tried to do in my book on the psychedelic section was honor it as a tool, and at the same time, like, be clear that it's not the be all end all. It is very useful, I talk about psychedelics. I talk about using them. I'm tripping balls right now. No, I'm just kidding.
and coherent.
I right. I'm a big micro fan, for sure. But I I do, Ram Dass obviously, I'm sure, is a huge hero to you too, in terms of just it seems like his life's message, which there were many, but one of the messages of his incarnation was these aren't, awakening in a gulp. It's like they are very valuable and they do have the possibility to completely shatter the conditioning, which is extremely useful. However, what's it's like the Alan Watts hang up the phone when you get the message. I like that Alan Watts image where he says, um, the biologist pulls away from the microscope. It's like you look in there, but I think just warmly sharing that disclaimer with some fellow psychonauts of like, it's good, but you also have to embody it. You have to take it with you as best you can, which can feel preposterous at times.
Yeah, I'd like to back that up with a couple little things. For
Yeah,
me, I started doing psychedelics way earlier than I should have in the brain development, and I've always been an experimenter
you're
really
12
high in
years old, Aaron. You shouldn't have been
yeah,
doing it then.
yeah, 14, yeah. Yeah.
14's pretty young, brother.
And
You turned out okay, but yeah,
yeah, it's a
maybe
long path.
maybe hold a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
But I really didn't have a mystical insight on psychedelics until my life was falling apart. And
Mm,
so it was like during the total, like all the masks of the ego, like the artificial grandiosity. I was like alcoholic, drugs, money problems, getting divorced, losing my house. And I did a psychedelic journey
mm,
when my whole ego was just like like my life was falling apart. And I just saw total non duality. And it was like when I came out of that journey, I was still the same person in the same challenging situation. And I was like, what do I do with this? What do I do with this insight
right,
now?
right.
But
Okay,
but I
I'm
had
back.
yeah, yeah. And then it was like another I don't know, 7, 8 years of development, like learning to be useful with this insight of non-duality and of trying to grow into a more healed and healthy being.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's an extremely useful tool, and I think it's hard to bring it back. One of the great Ram Dass lines too is, when you get high, you have to come down. So you don't want to get high, you want to get free. It's like a paradigm shift. But no, you're right. I mean, I think there's a lot more value of doing it in a place like that, kind of like when nothing is working, to just say, okay, this is, what's my message? What am I not hearing correctly right now? I think it's a heck of a lot better than a party or a festival, which can be fine, but they're not going to, probably not going to change your life like doing
For
it from
sure.
a contemplative practice, right?
Yeah, doing it in a contemplative or ceremonial way is so different
Yeah.
and much more powerful in many ways. Although I think there's beauty in just being interconnected with a group of beautiful people also. So, but
There
I can
is.
I can go on and on about the psychedelic realm. It's how I spend a lot of my life. I really I hold space with people, and I've just seen the magic that it is. But really, I think what's what's more interesting for our conversation is just kind of talking about this comparative language from different cultures and different times about these kinds of mystical insights about non-duality, about the self, about the soul, about what we are.
It's awfully, I mean, frustrating is kind of a funny word for it, but it's almost like, it almost is like annoying to me to see how clear the perennial connective philosophy is across the world faith traditions, and yet be faced with this world of human egos, which is full of stubbornness and closed mindedness that, has so much inability to see it. It's um and I say that as egoless as possible because the great mystics, men and women throughout history, who I honor, are the ones who have pointed it out to me. And some a few years of research here and there, but it's kind of like, is everybody else not seeing this? And then I'm in like mystic echo chamber Instagram, with you, and it's like people are starting to get it. We really are one. Really, all the paths are leading to the summit of the mountain. And then it's like, wait a second, there's 400,000 churches in America, Aaron. Maybe 360,000. Um, which church isn't bad, by the way. And I think sometimes my handle of original sin is a lie and book title, etc. Um, People just think I'm like this kind of anarchist, anti-Christian. Some of the anarchist, anti-Christians, I think, are disappointed when they find my stuff. They're like, "Wait, you love God? You're this mystic? What But anyway, I think part of me is like, yeah, people are really trying to get it, and then it's like, no, it's not fully. It's still in the esoteric world a bit, or it's a pejorative too, Aaron. I think some people dismiss it as naivete in New Age, and they say, oh, you can't connect all these. They're different and they're at war. And Sam Harris's book, The End of Faith, and Stephen Prothero wrote God is Not One. So, there are distinctions between the religious paths, but really for me, I mean, the Hindus, Indian philosophy as a whole, which is impossible to generalize, but generally speaking, the masters from the last, say, a couple hundred years, but really, I guess, a couple thousand. I'm more familiar with the more recent guys and gals, but they do a pretty damn good job, Aaron, of saying, oh, Jesus, he's an avatar. Oh, Buddha, he was an avatar. This is how this works. It's this wheel, you see, and you're in these souls, and you go around and around, and then I think the way I frame it in the book is Hinduism as a spiritual foundation. I think for me, really, Indian philosophy kind of is the ground floor of understanding. They're the ones who introduce all this stuff, meditations, the soul, the Atman as Brahman. Um, all these concepts really go back to their ancient text, and then from there, then you look at Plato and you see, oh, Plato talks about transmigration of the soul. Oh, Jesus, there's lines in the Gospels that sound like the Upanishads. And even Buddha, I'll say, we can kind of go in any direction here from a world faith tradition standpoint, but even the Buddha actually wasn't as much at odds with the perennial wisdom. What the Buddha was at odds with as a, essentially Hindu prince, he was correcting a decaying Hinduism in ancient India, just like Jesus was correcting a decaying Judaism. But the Buddha's teaching itself, isn't necessarily anti-Hinduism. And I've heard philosophers like Swami Sarvapriyananda, for example, which Google that guy. Um, he's a contemporary Ramakrishna monk, Vedantin monk, who does a very good job of explaining how close actually Atman and Anatta actually are. Atman being the Hindu conception of the soul, and the Anatta being the Buddhist conception of no soul or non-self. Um, it's not quite as antagonistic as kind of a spiritual religious scholars like to maintain. There's a lot of overlap within the Buddha himself, and so yeah, I don't know. It's a real honor for me. It's a real joy for me to be able to point out um, the similarities and acknowledge the differences, but um, you know they all reach the top, my brother.
No doubt. There's wisdom in pretty much everything. You can find answers in rap music, and if it's truth, it's
That's
truth.
right.
If it's truth, it's truth, and
That's true.
you can kind of recognize it. I wonder, with all of your discovery of the master's language, how do you perceive the soul as versus like the individual self?
It's a really good question, and I think that the best when we get into the heavy conceptual philosophy, for me, my kind of default is Advaita, which is often called the jewel of Indian philosophy. And for anyone who's not familiar, Ramana Maharshi is kind of the modern master of Advaita Vedanta, alongside Nisargadatta Maharaj, who wrote I Am That, or Conversations with Nisargadatta, or I Am That. They're the Advaita kind of kings of the 20th century. Comes from Adi Shankaracharya. That's not true, actually. He was actually a commentator or editor. He's known as the great editor. So it's actually potentially more ancient than that, but it's typically attributed to Shankara and then these kind of modern masters. And, essentially what it says is that this world is a dream. Um, it doesn't mean it's not relatively real. It just means that it's not absolutely real. It's not capital A absolute. It's not capital R real. But it is relatively real within the dream. And there are laws, physics within the dream that, um, apply to the conscious mind that is within the dream. Um, so I really see most of my kind of ontological questions through the Advaitin lens. I've also found Richard, the holy man, back to my Apache friend, recommended A Course in Miracles to me about 15 years ago. And so A Course in Miracles is also a non-dual text with a lot of very fascinating overlap to Advaita Vedanta, of all things. So those are really like my two pillars are in answering your question are Advaita Vedanta and A Course in Miracles. And ultimately they say, I think I'll do my best to kind of aggregate that viewpoint to say the soul is what A Course says is there's no difference between God and the soul, or the father and the child. But if you could say there was, then it would be that the father created the child. Uh, that language kind of starts to to be kind of flimsy, right? It's like it's actually not the ego mind, which is in the world of form, in the world of matter, gets frustrated that we can't quite explain it in that way. But I mean, I think children of God, I think, is the simplest way. The you are the beloved son, you are the beloved daughter of the one which is always was, is, and will be. Um, you are the progeny of that from a place of such unimaginable compassion and adoration. Um, Jesus tells the parable of the prodigal son, right, which is extremely radical for his time in teaching, where essentially he says the son threw away the king's inheritance. Prodigal means wasteful, and he says, it's like this. There was a quote unquote bad son, a prodigal son, who goes off, spends the money, gambles, drinks. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting Matthew. He winds up in an alley, and he's like, I got nothing left. The only place I can go back to is my father, the king, and the rich man. And maybe he'll let me work the fields. It's like I've ruined it all, but maybe he has a shred of empathy or forgiveness for me, and he comes back to the father, and the father sees his son on the horizon and runs to him and gives him the finest robe, kisses him, and says, let's throw a big party, and let's celebrate your he tells the quote unquote good son, which is kind of the moral righteous humans we all know, um, who says, wait, we're throwing a party for that piece of shit. And he says, your brother was lost and now he's found. Let's really party. And that's the Jesus, who in my view is an avatar. I'll agree with Yogananda. I do believe that Jesus was as high a level as you could get in human form, and he's telling us about the relationship of um, God to us, the Brahman to Atman, the individual soul. What that means. It means that there's no way you can escape the love of Creator.
Yeah, you can just forget that you're there.
That's
Yeah,
basically what we have. We have an amnesia, essentially, is what the mystics say. It is a remembering process, right?
it's my experience personally.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, a
we're
whole.
just captivated by the form. We're captivated by, again, kind of back to Hinduism, the lower chakras. We're captivated by survival. By first chakra is root, which is survival. Second chakra is sex. That's a powerful one. Third chakra is it's health, but it's also finance, power. It's kind of status, and we're all just down in those, and it's like we just forget, but it's okay. you know, it's
It's
all right.
yeah. Well, it
Don't.
is. Yeah, it
Mhm.
is. I like looking at the all these different like gradients and sections, the chakras and Ken
Mhm.
Wilber's, you know,
Yeah, love integral
integral
theory.
and yeah,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Where we talk about it from this turquoise or yellow conceptual structural thing, but then the majority of the world is still in beige, red, and we all evolved
Yeah.
transcend and include those things. We have to go through those examples of not knowing and learning, and then going through competition and going through egocentrism and going through these things until we can have enough experience that we've learned something, right? That idea that you can't really be found if you were never lost, then there's nothing happening.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it kind of, again, the across world mystic traditions, the dream really does seem to be the best image, um, because was the dream real? It sure seemed like it. I sure was, you know, waiting tables for a full crowd of people. It was stressful, you know. There was 100 people in a restaurant. There was 1,000 people in a restaurant. They could only fit 200. It was a packed restaurant, and I couldn't get the drinks to the table. And you wake up sweating, and but the dream figures disappear. It seems like, and I mean, I come on down the rabbit hole, Aaron. You already read my book, but you know what happens in my view with the awakened mind as an unawakened mind currently is that the awakened mind of the avatar or the masters of men and women throughout history, the reason they're actually able to kind of defy the laws of physics is because they have seen through the dreamlike nature of this plane, and they're able to, Jesus resurrecting, even, for example, um, is it's actually not that uncommon in Hindu guru stories. It sounds silly, like it's
Yeah, and autobiography
and
and
it's
things
not
like
that big
that.
it's not that big a deal. It happens to Hindu gurus all the time. They come back and see the disciples, and they say, this is, they give them the message that they needed to give, and it's Yogananda's guru Sri reappeared to him in the 30s or something. And so it's just because when to your point, that kind of evolution process, like when you've gone through all of the phases of awakening, the last one really does seem to be this kind of transcendental awareness that goes beyond it goes beyond matter, right? It goes beyond the gross matter, the material matter. And so it has this kind of light quality, this light form quality where they can appear and materialize and change things and not be as affected by the laws. And then frankly, it seems like they're not really around much after that. It's like once you're enlightened. I mean, Yogananda famously gave a speech and then died of a heart attack right there, and he kind of was giving hints that he was going out. It's like once you get to a certain level, actually, the idea is that the matter can't hold you anymore. It's like this is only this level place. So if you get beyond this level, you're not going to be around much longer.
My experience in medicine is that it, the there are teachers in many different dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
and many, like, time doesn't really exist. And when you learn to talk and navigate in the non-ordinary realities, you can just communicate with all these beings, and you don't, like, there is no, is that real or not? It's like, I know it is because I can see it. and so, like, you can see an ancestor talking. You can talk to Buddha or the thousands of Buddhas. You can, like, all of this is just there in the way I look at it, really. And I've seen it in a big ketamine experience, was that what we really are is we're, I knew, like, intellectually we are like transmitting receiving units. That's what
Mm-hmm.
our body is. But
Yeah.
really, when people talk about manifestation, really what we're doing is we're everything already, the entire infinity of everything exists omnipresently.
Mm.
And what we do is we learn to reduce the limiting factor more. We turn off the limitation, but the
Mm.
infinity is already there. And so when we're really, really closed off, we don't have that like shungo flow or the chakras aren't balanced or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And we haven't built a meditation practice or any way of going to the closet and closing the door. If you haven't
Sure.
done that, you haven't learned to open to the infinity to the level that's possible. And I think that gurus have just spent more time doing it.
That's beautifully put, and I that resonates with my understanding. Rumi says we're just polishing the mirror. He says, "How can you be irritated, or how can your mirror be clean if you're irritated by every rub?" Which is classic Rumi comedy.
Mhm.
But it's like, yeah, you're right. It's like there is this level of pure kind of reflection of the light ray that is our true identity. But we just got some smudges, it's okay. It's that process. This is what we're doing. We're undoing it. We're removing, to your point, we're removing the blocks to that awareness of of the all that is, right? I love how you put that.
I'd love to talk about one of those in the book that you wrote, which was the part you said you almost didn't put in there. This little jealousy around a
Mm,
person who was economically better than you, that found the spiritual path and created his system of service, and you found yourself being in that comparative place. I teared up from that, like
mm.
vulnerability from you, because it resonated so deeply with me. Like
No, thank you.
this idea that we've had all these big experiences and we know that like on one level we're God and or source or Allah or whatever you want to call it, the everything, the stardust energy, vibration.
Hmm.
And yet also we can look at that person next to us that's like 1% in front of us and be like relativistic.
It was very tangible for me. I think that was what was most surprising about it was, and I think part of it, I can't remember if this is in that piece, but it was it was at a lunch with other people that I hold really very highly. I think that was a component too of saying like, you know, it, what's the name of the section? It's like being more spiritual than you. It's like this guy made all this money and then got into spirituality, and like my ego was saying, well, I've been into spirituality for, when you were in your $1 million, quota, I was I was already on my fifth listen of Autobiography of a Yogi, man. And it was just like, that is, just seeing that come up was profound to just, um, show you where you aren't really. It's like, okay, let's lean into that. What's going on with that this means that I feel like I have a need to demonstrate to the other people, at least in front of me in this environment, that that's part of my past in a comparative way. And it's like, or actually you can just shift into a space of compassion and admiration for his transformation, and self-acceptance as well. It's like those are both tied, right? When you're accepting of yourself, you don't have any need to um, compare or contrast to anyone else. So I thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that was a tough one, but a few people have told me that one um, kind of makes the book unique. What I was trying to do, Aaron, was write something in between pop spirituality, which I like. I like a good pop spirituality book. Typically, they're a little thin for me, and I mean that with as little ego as possible. They're for plenty of people, but I wanted to give a little more meat, a few more references, than a pop spirituality book, but I also wanted to write something with more accessibility and humor than a religious textbook,
Mhm.
of which I've read. And I do like religious textbooks, some of them, but they're hard to read, and most people don't like to read them. So how could I kind of bridge those worlds? And I did my best.
And you contrasted that story with humor with the story of the I forget the exact nuance of it, but the person eating the food and then getting irritated, and then the guru laughing about this person eating the father, or I forget
Right.
the
Right. Yes. Yeah. Katya Yana's laughter. Yeah, who is a Buddhist saint who kind of saw the incarnations of people. Um, you know,
could you tell that story a little tiny bit more articulately?
yeah, there's a story, I believe it's from Lama Surya Das's book, because I got permission from his publisher to share that one. It's an ancient book. I think I just kind of cited his retelling of it. But yeah, it's this kind of saint, this crazy old Buddhist saint walks through this village, and he sees a woman eating a fish. She's holding a baby and kicking a dog that is trying to eat the fish. And he bursts out laughing. And she's like, "What the heck is so funny?" And the way he explains it is that the fish that he's eating is like a family member, or she's eating is a family member. Can't remember the exact relationships, but I want to say mom is the fish, dad is the dog, and then her enemy is the baby. And and it's kind of in this bizarro version of the relationships that she really cultivates and appreciates, and he's just laughing. He's laughing at samsara, right? The joke is like, this fleeting world, basically, Aaron. To your point, it's like the level of infinity of all of the timelines and dimensions and like realities and unrealities that are existing in the relative dream. I would argue actually that, kind of the universe and the multiverse aren't actually the absolute reality, a capital A, capital R. Like the absolute reality, there's no distinctions. There's no separateness. There's no um, it's just pure eternality and bliss. Hinduism, Sat Chidananda, consciousness, existence, bliss. And the universe, the multiverse, is kind of all of the different avenues of the dream, of the separation, or what, of course, Miracles calls it the split mind, right? It's like this is the split mind traversing all of these meandering labyrinthine mazes that are ultimately disappear when upon the awakening from the dream.
The law of one octave.
Yeah, I think that's the law of one kind of vibe.
It,
Gary Renard is a great writer that has influenced me deeply. He's an A Course in Miracles teacher. His first book is called Disappearance of the Universe,
which,
and
because of an Instagram post you had, I read.
amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
great. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, did you enjoy it?
So I was reading it, and then I went or listened to it as an audiobook. And as I was finishing it, I went and did a several day ayahuasca journey with that as a thought
Amazing.
primer.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, that
Uh,
sounds like a juicy weekend.
it was really beautiful. Yeah. So I like to test things. I don't want to believe anything. I want to
Beautiful.
know.
Yeah, I honor that. I think that's a profound practical implementation way of like You have to really know it. You have to grok it. So I'm aligned with you on that. Was the Aya trip validating for like
Yeah, it
material?
was. It was.
Cool.
And it also, because like in the integration circle, I brought up that book and
Hmm.
ACIM, and then that opened up doors to beautiful conversations to people in that level of
Amazing.
depth that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So
Absolutely.
again, it's
Amazing.
like all these little like connected dots that are.
Yeah, and
I've
then like somebody there might have heard of it that hadn't, and then now they read it. It's like there's just this like domino effect of it all.
But I've found that ACIM is very in line with my insights in psychedelic work.
Beautiful.
I think it's a little bit long winded for me sometimes.
Not
But
a little bit. It is quite the tome. And it's funny. I mean, I think it's. I went to a Course in Miracle study group for a few years, and one of the old guys. In fact, it was mostly old white folks. Gotta love them. And this guy goes, "It's not a speed read," And I love that line. Well, I will say this though about the Course in Miracle students: there would be like these little old white ladies, um, and they would be explaining the most sophisticated nuances of non-duality and illusion and like correcting sight and seeing the one and all these things. I mean, it was the most room full of philosophers, but they looked like the little old lady at line in the grocery store, and the cashier that like, you know, you just have no idea. Back to the idea of Buddha at the gas pump. It's like I mean I heard some of the most beautiful insights from on the dream and this in a psychedelic way nature of reality from just little old white lady that is busy buying mangoes and milk and eggs.
what I've found a lot of joy with all this comparative reading is I don't think I'm ever going to find a truth in there that I don't already experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like it provides language like tat twam asi. When I first found that, I was like, what a beautiful little piece of language in the Upanishads that just was like, oh, that's true.
Yeah,
Uh,
you felt that one a few years
yeah,
ago, Yeah.
yeah.
There's
And it's
there's
like,
almost a validating quality to scripture. I was talking to a friend about this, where it's like, someone like you who's had a lot of mystical experiences and psychedelic experiences, it's almost like you have those first, and you're like, what the hell is going on? And then you read and you go, oh, this is
exactly. That's exactly my
this
path.
is what it's. Yeah, I mean, it's that's a profound way, and it's kind of like there's no coming back after that. It's like you've already felt it and experienced it. There was this level of mystery, there still is, but what the scriptures have use in you know making sure that that you're on the right track.
Yeah. I've found that with all the insight between the intellectual just investigation, my path has been like maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I just started wondering, what is truth? What does humankind know about truth? And
Mm.
so it sent me down all these like ancient rabbit holes, but also the new age stuff and quantum mechanics and just all the different angles of it. And now I study under Hamilton Souther at Blue Morpho.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of opened my mind in a whole different way with the
Oh,
ability to
amazing.
navigate reality in the with ancient shamanic techniques and wisdom, because it's all experiential and oral.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found at the end of it all so far, to the middle of it all, wherever I am right now,
Right.
the takeaways are so simple. It's like
Mm.
cherish life. It's be kind and compassionate. It's
Right.
forgive yourself for errors. It's recognize the scarce gift and resource that life is while you're here.
Yeah.
Reincarnation or not, this mind and body complex is going to die for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
in like one phrase that talks about Maya and life that it's really just stuck with me since I heard it somewhere, which is like, yeah, everything is an illusion, but some illusions are more difficult than others, and the most difficult is the death of a child. But it's just this like everything matters in a way that we can't comprehend.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, I think I think there isn't a course line that says like essentially everything that's happening to you is the exact, mirror, right? To use that word again, it's the exact stimuli to your need from a place of remembrance. Like, are you going to use it for your remembering process, or are you going to kind of push it aside and keep going, stay in the slog of it and just get the next one? And it's like you have that choice. I think that is the beauty of free will. And like, there's this weird kind of like determinism movement right now around like, so in some it's like in some hardcore secular biologists that are saying like free will is an illusion. And I am, it's a 180 for me, because it seems like it's the only thing that we have. Actually, it seems, according to a course, and I think really, mystic, a lot of the mystic language is revolves around discipline, right? And um, kind of spiritual. It's all a choice. It's all, um, of course, simplifies it to love or fear, right? Um, it, are you going to live from a place of love? Are you going to live from a place of fear? Love exists as all this, cornucopia of, like you said, forgiveness, gratitude, um, appreciation, empathy, and so on. Um, and kind of perspective. Like, are you going to use that moment? Like, which route, which of the two routes are you going to take on each moment? And
I think you have to I think you have to have a moment of grace that allows that choice to be possible. That's my
mm-hmm,
experience was before a certain level of understanding. I don't think
mm,
I really had choice because it was so habitual and external.
yeah,
And
mm-hmm,
so after there was like a level of awakening, now can look inside and connect to the universe in a way that allows that choice. And I've also seen that in a high dose DMT experience where I
mm,
watched a deity. It was very clear this deity created my entire evolution,
wow,
and I it showed it to me, and I could feel it. It was ancient, 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 and it then showed me the two paths of the ultimate choices I could make. It showed me the future. If I was like this, like horrible, making ignorant choices and hurtful choices, how bad I have the power to damage the world. And
yeah,
also how well I can beautify the world if I make those choices. And then it just returned me to the center of the present moment with this understanding of like the duality of choice. But it didn't
it's
say that
powerful.
these are like destined single outcomes. It says these are potential futures. And I did that journey years ago, and I'm still connected to it. If I close my eyes, I can feel it. I know
I'm
where
going
it
to be
is.
thinking about it.
Yeah, like I can
Profound.
sense the orientation of where this is. And I wondered for a long time, is that God? And I was like, no, because it's a specific entity.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew it was like a demigod, but it's like within the realm that created me. I couldn't tell if it was for the planet, but it felt very much like mine.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow. Beautiful.
and
Thanks for
yeah,
sharing that.
there's so many like in the synchronicities that I've seen in my life. Also are so bizarre and complex that
Well, that lines up. I mean, Aaron, that lines up with a lot of the mystical language too. I mean, the Gnostics have a pretty rich cosmology, which they're hard to generalize too. A lot of people generalize the Gnostics. They have a lot of variation themselves. God bless those old heretics. They have a rich cosmology in a few books where essentially it's actually the creator is a false god. You might know that. That's kind of one of the more larger ideas, but it's like levels of kind of angels. In some texts they're called aeons, but they are archons as like the villains. There's a rich cosmology, but basically there's it's kind of reminding me of like Zelda or like Lord of the Rings or something, where there's like a Tolkien, like there's like 20 and one Sophia is the last one, and she looks in one of the stories, she looks off from a place of envy at the ultimate creator, and that envy look creates what's called the Yaldabaoth, the false creator god, and that's the creator of this plane. And so yeah, I mean, to your point, like there's all these kind of hierarchies of creators and deities and pantheons, and but I think coming back to that main point around like choice, that is so inherent in every being, that even this ancient god demigod that created your evolution can't make the choice for you. Like you're the one, your conscious connection to creator, that's our birthright. Our birthright is the ability to create, to choose based on our own essentially will, our own will, either for, Yogananda also breaks everything down kind of divine or carnal, which is a common kind of dualistic way of like, we're either animal or we're angel, we're carnal or divine, we're fear or love, we're separation or unity. These are all just words and forms that cover the same idea, like which choice are you going to make. So um, you sharing that experience, that really lines up with a lot of the kind of theological conceptual overlay that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I was kind of, when you opened up the um, initial conversation around like comparative religion, kind of been working on some like I, I'm trying to untangle. Well, I do in the book actually a little bit, but I'm trying to do it more with my content and kind of future work around exclusivity, and in particular John 14:6. If you're familiar with
Which
John
is what?
14:6. So John chapter 14 verse 6 in the Bible, in the New Testament, is a line from Jesus that is the probably the most quoted Bible verse on my content by Christians, and it's most quoted on kind of mystic content and New Age content, etc., by Christians. It's Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." And it's kind of like it's their argument for exclusivity, right? It's like he said it. He said it's the only way, and nobody except me. And I'm kind of to go into that one further. What I'm saying from a mystic standpoint is a few things. One is that the Gospel of John is extremely symbolic. It's not very historical. I'm a big New Testament nerd, as you know, and the synoptic gospels, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, they're called the synoptics. They're to be read together, is what that means. They're earlier. John is much later. They're in the 70 to 100 CE period. Um, John is 100 to 120. So it's definitely the last one. And even Clement of Alexandria, who was an institutional early church father figurehead, called John the spiritual gospel. They were like, yeah, John's the spiritual gospel. It's nice, but it's different. And that doesn't mean throw it out. I think there's some really great lines in there. Um, but it does mean that, like, for example, there's no nativity in John. Um, the the beginning of John is extremely symbolic. It's extremely mystical. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, the Logos, and so that's kind of the John piece. Is it's symbolic and not historical. Two is he's speaking to the direct disciples, right? And so when Jesus is teaching, um, and I'm kind of working on this material, so thank you for letting me just riff on it. The second piece is he's speaking to the disciples. So when Jesus is preaching, you can look at the audience to help understand the meaning. When he's talking to very large crowds, he's typically much more direct. Blessed are the peacemakers, for example. The Sermon on the Mount is very just straightforward. It's because he's talking to a bunch of people. Smaller groups, he uses parables, which is kind of his way of giving a deep teaching, but it's also kind of masked by the metaphorical meaning. He can kind of get away with things by giving deep teachings in small groups with the parables. But the disciples, they get the true identity, and they get very spiritual language, I guess is the best way to describe it. And in that period, when he says that, John 14:6, he's talking to the direct disciples. Right before that line, he says, I can't remember the exact verse, but he kind of verse and number, but he says, before Abraham was, I am. So he's explaining that he existed before the founder of Judaism, who lived as a man hundreds and hundreds of years before him, right? So he's speaking from this place of Christ consciousness. He's speaking from this place of the I am identity. He's not speaking from this place of I'm a man in a body and I'm the only way and no one comes to the Father except through me. He's speaking on this extremely rich spiritual identity piece, which is actually not exclusive. It's inclusive of all. It's the way of unconditional love is the way to the Father. No one comes to the Father except through this embodiment of the I am. And so that's kind of the piece on Jesus. And then the third thing I would say is plenty, as you know, plenty of other spiritual teachers use I am statements. The Buddha, I am awake. Krishna has some stuff. I just posted, or maybe I haven't yet, but I'm ever scheduled. I'm about to post it, of his piece on um, Krishna goes off on a few things. Here he says, I am the self seated in the hearts of all creatures. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings. So, it's like when you attain that level, that's how you talk.
My
Um,
yeah, my experience when I read that line in the Bible after my mystical like understanding of myself is it's clearly that's just like from this state of awareness.
yeah.
And it's like there's a in a non spiritual teaching book called Whole Brain Living. Have you heard of this book?
Mm-hmm.
Whole Brain Living was written by a woman who was like a brain scientist who had a stroke and watched her brain kind of disintegrate. And so she talks about the human brain as being in four different characters. There's like the character one is kind of like the intellect that gets stuff done.
Mm,
Character two is the one that keeps you safe, like the kind of primal brain that's like
right.
reactive.
The fight or flight. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like so it looks at like character two looks at the body as a responsibility Character one looks like
Mm,
a tool. Character three looks at it like a toy. It's what lets you dance and play
mm,
and
mm-hmm.
sing. And character four looks at it like a temple of God. And so when her brain went away, characters one and two dissolved with the stroke. And so she was only in this like playful, non dual reality for many years until her brain kind of came back online and she like remembered what fear was and remembered what anger was and
Mm,
jealousy was,
mm-hmm.
but she didn't have it for a long time. So I think the mystical insight, the mystical frame of reality is just being able to tap into character for like
Mm.
100% of the time. Or when you're there, you're in that state of awareness. And when you get triggered and reactive, your character two turns on and character one gets into like hyperactive mode and this kind of a thing. And on another point that you were talking about, which was in the beginning, there was the word. My understanding of reality at a fundamental level is that at the beginning there was ambiguous consciousness itself,
Mm-hmm.
and secondly there was language, and language meaning it's like not just English or Farsi or something, but DNA sequencing, vibrations of all nature. So the first thing is this thought. It's like the one living consciousness. It's the monastic, non separate plenum or void, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Followed by when the Big Bang, the universe, when all that happened, that was the instantaneous formation of all language and all
Right.
perception, all the structures of mathematics and physics, and all of that was the the word. That's how I
Absolutely.
perceive it.
Yeah. The own, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very. I mean, again, it's like it's frustrating, Aaron. The beginning was the word. Was it the universal cosmic vibration of auditory phenomena? Probably. John reading the Vedas? Maybe,
Maybe.
or maybe he was just tapped in. Yeah, no, beautifully put. When's your book coming out? My goodness.
I've been asked a lot over my life, but I don't know. I feel like that process is a lot of discipline.
It is a lot of discipline. Thanks for saying that. It's well, you put it nice, so that's my sincere compliment to you, and your experiences could likely help people, but you're also talking about on the pod, so that's a great outlet too. But yeah, no,
I
I like writing, so I'm gonna put out some more of these. They take a long time, but it's a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. My daily life is I'm a contractor. I build custom bathrooms,
Oh, amazing.
and and I'm also hold plant medicine ceremonies,
Very cool.
and I kind of look at my whole life like a prayer.
Yeah.
Every tile I set is done with this level of intention and love, and I know I'm
Mm,
creating spaces that people go and prepare their day and
that's
raise
beautiful.
their families and that type of thing. Again, it's like the Buddha at the gas station thing. And one of the interesting things about my life is I get to be all esoteric like this with really, really wealthy people who I would never meet otherwise.
That's good. You're
Uh,
planting seeds in
yeah,
the socioeconomic classes,
yeah.
and folks on all sizes need, a little bit of this, I think, humbly. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
I think we all can cross pollinate. I mean, that's what this referential learning that you've done the work on or are doing the work on. Do you have any experience looking at African history?
Not a ton. I need to. I had a small piece on shamanism as kind of an intro to the psychedelic chapter, as you may recall, and so that was my shout out to indigenous wisdom, kind of across the world. But no, African wisdom isn't my speciality. I do admire the Dogon people, from what I understand about them. They were some of the most advanced astrologers that we are aware of, and they're like Bushmen. So
Mhm.
that's fucking interesting and cool, and should be worth further exploration there. But yeah, it's mostly Indians. I mean, really, Yogananda is, as you can see, I'm practically a devotee.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'd say my other kind of big one that, speaking of pop spirituality, I guess, is Thich Nhat Hanh. He captivated me early. I read Thich Nhat Hanh 14, 15, something like that. Living Buddha, Living Christ. And, even though I kind of went more into the really Hindu and Christian worlds than he is, Buddhism does have that practical. Um, it's just so, it's almost kind of like when everything is not working, Buddhism is just, it's so simple. And it's like somebody like Thich Nhat Hanh who really embodied that, and showed us that, like, you can actually see the miracle of the cosmos in a sunflower. It's, where else is it? It's
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
One laughing baby is awakening. It's like, he has
The,
this like simplicity of it.
the
Just
Great Bell Chant is like one of my favorite things in the whole world.
amazing.
It's
Yeah.
just such a beautiful, short, like poetic little verse, and yeah, I listen to it regularly because it's just
Amazing.
it rings true. With Thich Nhat Hanh. An interesting thing for me, like I have heard him a few times,
Hmm.
and just like in audio programs and things like that. And
Yeah.
one day I
Like,
was,
you just hear his voice and you're like, oh,
yeah,
I'm okay.
yeah,
It's gonna be
yeah.
all right.
And then I was there one day, and I was just like just thinking about him, and I hadn't thought about him for like several years, and I was like, I'm just like feeling so compelled to look him up. I'm like, why? I don't know. I looked him up online, and it was live his
His
funeral.
pass. Yeah,
I,
he
I,
just
I had no,
passed.
yeah, and it was just
Wow.
like
A couple
I was
years
just
ago.
like connected to it, like right when it
Oh,
was happening. I was like, what a interesting, magical little,
well, that's transmission and receiving, to your
yeah,
earlier point. That's how it works for sure. It it was a big broadcast, you know,
hmm
um, him going. And I think another thing about him that I really, really honor, and I'm kind of getting back into this part of my life, around activism. I um, I was a Bernie Sanders campaign phone banker. Didn't work for the campaign, but I volunteered and ran Facebook ads and made content, and was a big, like, 16 and 20 Bernie supporter. And I also made a film about Palestine several years ago, just from meeting Palestinians, kind of documentary, spiritual documentary, and like advocacy documentary. And I think he's probably, I mean, King, who I'm referring to these days as the greatest American. Big fan of MLK. There's a reason he has a street in every fucking city in this country. Um, and he died, 50 years ago. Um, and Thich Nhat Hanh, those two guys could not be more spiritual, and they could not be more active. Thich Nhat Hanh, talking about, there's a great documentary that they put out, Plum Village, after his passing, around, it's called A Cloud Never Dies, something like that. Short YouTube documentary, but it talks about his history, his past, and it was the Vietnam War. He was a monk, on the top of a mountain, basically, and the Vietnam War happened. And he said, somewhere in there, in his kind of, he's like mid 20s or something, and he said, it's hard to meditate when there's bombs going off. Kind of in a joking way. It's like, you can't. Spirituality actually does activate you to be of service. to other
Mm-hmm.
people and to relieve suffering. And like there is a way, I think that there are there is a wide variety of ways to help, and they are mental and verbal and physical and economic and you name it, but culinary.
Use
um
all the tools.
yeah, exactly. And also pick your lane. I mean, I think there's definitely you can, because you can't do them all, but you can do one, or a couple. But yeah, he really kind of validates, and I think his perspective in the kind of really, I mean, a lot of like the police brutality stuff about 10 years ago, if you recall, being heated online. There was a lot of deaths, 14, 15, 16, particularly in the Black American community. And then, of course, George Floyd in 2020, and then Palestine. There's a lot of the volcanoes smoking a little bit, and it's like, it's good, but in my view, it would be well served to have that level of like spiritual compassion and grounding, from your Thich Nhat Hanhs and your Ram Dasses, your MLKs, um, because it's like they were effective. I mean, it's like they weren't pushovers. They weren't. There's a myth. There's a myth that spirituality is indifferent or apathetic, which it's not. There's a myth that spirituality is ineffective in the world in some ways. um, and I think it's really the opposite. I really think that it, at its best, um, can really charge you up. So I think in a lot of the, it seems like there's always some kind of tumult out here in Maya. So it's like, okay, like how can we contribute to a better world, a better dream, while at the same time not losing our own grounded sense of reality.
For sure, I think that being a martyr is not in alignment, but honoring one's own needs and understanding that we want to be, well, we can't not be anything but fully interconnected with the world around us
Right.
through gravity and air and economics and language and etc. Like we're part of that whole thing, and so we need to take care of ourselves, our health, our sleep, our family,
Mm.
our free time, our education, and where we have excess capacity, use it to serve the people in a beneficial way, but not as like somebody who's anything other than what it is, which is just we're interdependent, and it matters because when you see suffering, we feel it, and when it gets too close to us, it affects our actual practical life. And I've got one of the Dalai Lama's like writings. It's like on my refrigerator, and it says something like, "When we're born, we're dependent. When we die, we're dependent.
Yeah.
In the middle, you should probably be kind."
Right. Right. That's good.
Well,
That's true.
we're it's just because we're like in some like window of life where we have like opulence and safety and health, like that is intrinsically going to go away.
Yeah.
And whether that be at the hand of somebody who's angry and low vibration, or whether that just be because of time and the natural fatigue of the body, some way it's going to go away. And
Yeah.
and so just that recognition of like taking care of your parents and doing what you can for them, and your family and the local community and the people you actually interface with, like being nice to the grocery clerk and being nice to, like when there's something that's inconvenient in your life, like not being reactive about it. It's really simple stuff.
Mm.
And I think part of it's like what you do in a lot of ways, let alone the the Palestine, and I see a lot of your posts and stuff, but the amount of effort it takes to write a book like this and to try to just like, hey, look, this is not against each other. All these like continents and time spans are, they're all just saying the same thing in general. If you extract away from like the local socioeconomic structures and problems that they've got, right? The people reaching for power, and like you read the Quran and it's not some crazy like fundamentalist book. It's like pretty much the Bible.
It's pretty much the Bible. It's very kind of rules
It's the same
to the.
characters.
It's the same characters. It's the greatest hits, right? Yeah, it's just a continuation, but the polarity, the ego comes from fear, and the ego is the one that's driving that. It's saying no, they're different. They're, you know, or worse, they're less than us.
Mhm.
I mean, really, that's what a lot of the conflicts are about. We're special. We're the specialist, and yeah,
And
I
well, and
just
that
don't see it
works.
that way.
Well, that propaganda works. That's why sports teams exist. And
It's very effective. Yeah.
mhm. Another way to serve the world that I find like most satisfying, and you likely do too. You wrote about in the book, is being a father.
Hmm.
I think that really one of the best things that like the grace of the mysticism insight for me has given is like an ability to understand consequences differently and to bring me to a more present state. And so my daughter has a more present family.
Yeah. How old's your daughter?
2.5.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I
Um,
kind of figure
Congrats.
thank you. I always kind of joke, but not really. Like my primary responsibilities are to pay the bills and to not crush her imagination.
It's beautiful. That's great. Yes. Yeah. They're mirrors. I feel like I'm overusing that word, but we're in a mirror like existence. This guy reflects me so much. He's 4, and it's like, I mean, not only is he repeating everything I'm saying verbally, but like it's reaction to other people. He's mimicking. Um, it's very it it's the most intimate level of seeing yourself in the world, because it's like right there being replicated in real time. And it's like, it is to the kind of conversation about choice earlier. It's like it is hitting home. Which choice how are you going to react to this event?
Mhm.
And are you going to do so in a way that serves this person to their highest? Or are you going to flip out, man? And yeah, no, and I love what you said about imagination. I think too, I told these, I think, soon to be parents, hopefully they're a married couple, on this other podcast. They were asking me about him, and I just said, I'm trying to validate him. It seems like so many kids that grow up and are sad adults or are lacking something. It's like anytime anytime a child is kind of trying to be themselves, or trying to be real, trying out being kind, like trying out having fun. Like, is it okay? That's all they're really trying to say, is like, is this okay? Is this safe? Is it, And so I was like, yes, like it's our job to just say, oh, you were kind right there. Like, rock on, brother. Like that's the correct move. Your dad is validating you when you're being authentic, or when you're apologizing, or when you're being honest. And I think right now he's 4.5, and so I'm like, I am dealing with some a little bit of, well, my dad calls him strong-willed,
Mm.
which is a nice way to put it. And I think, in my view, dad's job is occasionally to check the guy.
Mhm.
And so, we're doing that sometimes, but I'm trying to do so from a place of like real grounded presence and, doing my best. But yeah, it's a beautiful opportunity to practice this stuff in real time. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, it's patience and it's presence and it's joyfulness and all of that. It's also just like accepting of the great mystery.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
we don't know what's wrong with if there's a sickness, don't know what they're going to turn out to be. and and
Oh
I think
yeah.
it's just so fun.
Well, their joke is my family's joke is that he's going to be a Wall Street trader, just because I'm like, Buddhist, Hindu renunciate. It's like we have no. To your point, it's like we have no.
Well,
You know,
if he does, then he'll probably get into effective altruism. Have you heard of this term?
right, right. He'll be a you know generous capitalist. Yeah.
Make
He'll
all
be
the money, but then give it
humanitarian.
away.
Yeah, exactly. He'll be a global humanitarian. That's right. Once
Hey,
he gets the trade secrets.
yeah, I'd love to offer you one chance just to kind of say anything you'd love to summarize that you'd like just to put out there, if there's anything on your mind, and then kind of like wind this thing down.
Sure. I mean, we've covered a lot of great ground, and I really appreciate you sharing your experiences. I have not had the level of psychedelic journeys that you've had, and so I love hearing those stories and how they validate a lot of the mystic traditions. A friend of mine asked me recently, said, "What's your big idea?" And I thought it was a great question. And then he goes, "Not like in a Gary V way, or like not in like a Shark Tank way, but in like a Dharma, of your incarnation way."
Hmm.
And which is how I interpreted it, but it was a useful clarification. And mine is, "You're not dirty."
Hmm.
um, and that's really what original sin is a lie means. I think original sin is a lie. It's a good hook. It's provocative. I love it and I like it because, as you know me and my work, like I'm pretty warm. I'm, you know, I'm spiritual SpongeBob in some ways, Aaron. I'm just a nice guy, a kind person, and mostly, and I kind of associated all of my life's work really right now is hangs on this title that um, can be misinterpreted from that, and so I like to be clear about the definition of it. It really just means you're inherently good. It means original sin is a lie. It just means you're inherently good. You're not dirty. And yeah, just to kind of reiterate that point from earlier, there is no escaping the love of Creator. I think as much as I can megaphone that um, to another pair of ears or two, that is worth the audio waves.
Made out of it, right?
Right, which we're made of, which we come from, exactly. Thanks so much for having me, brother.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really beautiful to connect, and I appreciate you and your work. And I'll do my best to help kind of spread it out there. So thank you.
Likewise. Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. We'll be in touch.
All right. Peace.
Alrighty. Take care.